books. Thank you so much for being here on this very warm Sunday afternoon. We have a big sale going on right now. You might have noticed the wooden book caddies have 50% off signs on them. If you have any questions about the sale, feel free to ask. We're super excited to have you all here for a celebration of an anthology called America, We Call Your Name, Poems of Resistance and Resilience. We have the senior editor here tonight, as well as 3 wonderful local authors. And I will introduce the editors. Marie Silverstein is the senior editor of America, We Call Your Name, Poems of Resistance and Resilience, and The Place That Inhabits Us, Poems of the San Francisco Bay Watershed, both from 16 Rivers Press. He is the author of 2 books of poetry, Master of Leaves and Any Old Wolf, which received the 2007 Independent Publisher Medal for Poetry. He is a retired architect and co-author of 4 books about architecture. His poems have appeared in Rattle, Brooklyn Review, Spillway, California Quarterly, Poetry East, West Marin Review, Runes, Nimrod, and elsewhere. Silverstein lives in Oakland, California. Please join me in welcoming him.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Greetings from Oakland. I've been coming to Austin for the last 12 years, I think, routinely in the role of being a grandfather. Both of my kids have lived, most of my adult kids have lived here. This is my first time to be here in the role of poet, in this case, editor poet. So I'm very thankful to Malvern Books for hosting us, and it's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you all for coming. Also, as I see some very old pals in the audience, thank you for coming and helping us to investigate through the lens of poetry the predicament, if not the mess, that our country is in today. America, We Call Your Name, Poems of Resistance and Resilience. And what we're going to do this afternoon, I'll say a few things about the book by way of introduction, and then read some excerpts from it. And then I've invited 3 Austin poets to read from the book as well. Well, actually 2 Austin poets, Abe Louise Young and Jesus Baez, and the 3rd, Miriam Greenberg, is a Bay Area poet currently, however with old Austin and Texas affiliations. Miriam was born here and is now a writer in residence at the Dobie Paisano Foundation. Right after the 2016 election, a poet friend in the Bay Area, who is also an administrator of a local arts foundation, proposed a grant to our press, at 16 Rivers Press, a poetry collective in Northern California, to put together a collection in response to the election. What did poetry have to say at this moment in our history? I agreed to take on the project as senior editor, imagining from the start a book which would mix older poems from other periods with poems written in the post-election heat, hoping this approach would give both voice and perspective to our current struggles and say something about resilience for the long haul. To this end, we gathered the poems for this project in 2 ways. First, in the spring of 2017, we conducted a nationally advertised open submission and received about 2,000 poems from all across the country. They were from red states and blue states, from all ages, high schools to nursing homes. In fact, 2 poems by high school students made their way into the anthology. Second, we asked the poet members of the press, it's an active collective of about 20 folks, along with other poet pals, to nominate poems for the project. Anything except their own work, from any time, that they thought spoke to the present moment in the voice of poetry. And from this call, another 300 poems came forth. And that was the material from which we wove together this book. Essentially, it became a 50-50 weave of this nominated material going through the filter of poets who read constantly poetry and the history of poetry, and folks writing in the present moment in response to the election. The book was published last September. It's been out almost a year. It's now in its 2nd printing, and I'm delighted to say it recently was awarded the 2019 Independent Publisher Prize, the IPPY, in the category of anthologies. and I actually have 3 stickers left from the award. If anybody buys the book today and wants a sticker, see me. A word about the architecture of the book. It's made up of 9 sections. Sections we came to think of as if they were transcripts of wild town hall meetings where citizen poets, some living, some dead, gathered to make their case in conversation at this moment in American history. The poems in the first 2 sections have their hooks more or less in the present moment, and they chart the mood of these times, though you will find more than a few of the dead poets I mentioned chiming in those first sections. The 5 middle sections of the book take up one by one, and this simply fell out by the way we saw the poems coming in and how they came to organize themselves in themes. These 5 middle sections take up the roots of our troubles, racism and the legacy of slavery, the newly emboldened white rage, the stupid wars we foisted on our young, the capitalism without end, ecocide, guns, the immigration crisis, the whole sorry package exposed to what I call lyrical thinking. And the last 2 sections of the book tilt toward hope, though hope can be an elusive thing in poetry and shed some light and some darkness, I fear, on it. There's an overall arc to the book, beginning with Adrienne Rich's What Kind of Times Are These?, written around 1990, I believe, her poem in response to a Bertolt Brecht poem, To Those Who Come After, written in Germany on the eve of World War II. So from the Adrienne Rich poem at the beginning to the Jane Hirschfield poem, which closes the book, Let Them Not Say, also a poem of witness, an incantation published online by the American Academy of Poets on the day of Trump's inauguration, January 2017. And we'll hear both those poems today by our readers, Adrienne Rich's poem and the Jane Hirschfield poem. One of the pleasures for me of working on this project was discovering the connecting threads that ran through it, tying together poems from different periods and finding in them sparks which I felt illuminate the present moment. When you get the book, you'll flip through it and you'll begin to see that there's poems on facing pages that speak to each other very directly. What I want to do is give you a taste for that kind of thread and spark by jumping right into the middle of the book. And section 4, it's a section called Jubilee Blues, and this is the section on the legacy of slavery and racism. It's a section that begins with Claudia Rankine's proposition from her book Citizen. I'm quoting from Claudia Rankine, because white men can't police their imagination, black men are dying. And the section concludes with Robert Hayden's gorgeous sonnet to Frederick Douglass, which begins, when it is finally ours, this freedom, this liberty, this beautiful and terrible thing. The 3 poems I want to read you come from the middle of that section. And it's a thread that I'm going to begin with lines from Shakespeare's The Tempest. And I'm going to, from that, I'll continue with a few lines from a book called The Voyage of the Sable Venus by the LA poet laureate Robin Costa Lewis. And I'll conclude with a sonnet by the young black poet Shane McCrae, writing today a poem called America Gives Its Blackness Back to Me. So that's my selection, and then we'll go on and hear the other folks reading today. I need to set mine up a bit. I chose this passage from The Tempest. The Tempest is written essentially and began to be performed in London around 1610, 1615 era time. Essentially the moment in which, as we now has become to our attention through a recent New York Times initiative called the 1619 Project, the same time essentially in which the first ship containing enslaved Africans arrived on then colonial shores in Virginia. So in this passage from The Tempest, you have, it's like a laser poet taking a laser look at the feelings that I will call white supremacy. Because the play, of course, is about the two folks, the Duke and his daughter, who land on the island, enslaved immediately, in this case, the native of that island. So we'll hear Miranda, we'll hear Prospero and his daughter Miranda speaking, and then you'll hear, this is the point in which Caliban enters the play at the beginning, and you'll hear the first few lines of Caliban speaking. And from that, I'll go to this passage from the Voyage of the Sable Venus. That's a very unusual book, written by Robin Costa-Lewis, now the Poet Laureate of Los Angeles. It's a book that she created, she crafted by taking from museums and libraries for the last several thousand years, material covering the last several thousand years, that are essentially, and I'm going to get a quote from her, they're slowly, the text that she's writing is essentially assembled from titles, catalog entries, or exhibit descriptions of Western art objects in which a black female figure is present, dating from 38,000 BC to the present. It's a very unusual project, very haunting and beautiful book, which I want to recommend. I'm taking a few lines from the middle of that book, which are essentially descriptions of photographs taken during the period of American slavery. And from that, I'll go straight to Shea McCrae's sonnet that I've already mentioned. So, The Tempest. Prospero, we'll visit Caliban, my slave, who never yields us kind answer, but as 'tis we cannot miss him. He does make our fire, fetch in our wood, and serves in offices that profit us. What ho, slave, Caliban! Thou poisonous slave, come forth! Caliban enters. As wicked do as ever my mother brushed with raven's feather from the unwholesome fen drop on you both. This island's mine, by Sycorax, my mother, which thou takest from me. Prospero. Thou, most lying slave, whom stripes may move, not kindness. Stripes are the lashes of the wounds of the dog. So stripes may move, not kindness. I have used thee, filth as thou art, with humane care, and lodged thee in mine own cell. His daughter Miranda. Abhorred slave, I pitied thee, took pains to make thee speak, taught thee each hour one thing or another, when thou didst not, savage, know thine own meaning, but wouldst gabble like a thing most brutish. I endowed thy purposes with words that made them known. But thy vile race, though thou didst learn, had that in it which good natures could not abide to be with. And Caliban's killer line. You taught me this language, and my profit on it is I know how to curse. The red plague rid you for learning me your language. From the Voyage of the Sable Venus catalog for at auction, Negro man in loincloth serves liquor to men bidding to on the slaves, while a slave woman attends two women observing the sale. African slave, encased in an iron mask and collar. Slave children starting out to harvest coffee on an ox cart. Negroes under a date plum. Negro woman seated at a table facing left, writing with a quill. Negro woman seated, writing with a quill. America gives its blackness back to me. The shadow I had carried lightly has been forced upon me now, and heavy since, bulky since, now, and since unwieldy as a corpse, the shadow I was born from, in and to, I should have known. I couldn't, being as how it wasn't me who lifted it, not all the way from me in the first place, being as how its lightness after was a gift, its near bodilessness a gift. From those who bind it to me now, I should have known. I couldn't, while they watched me set it loose. They bind it to my back, they make it strange that I knew in my arms they weigh it down with the shadow they had kept the bindings in. America gives its blackness back to me. Now I'd like to introduce the other two readers, each of whom are going to pick selections from the book that they've made and read them to me. First, going to be Abe Louise Young. She taught at Mishner Center for Writers at the University of Texas, at Austin and Loyola University Chicago, as well as at social justice organizations, bookstores, libraries, and jails. She's the author of 3 chapbooks of poetry, Poem for a Friend Growing Lighter and Lighter, from Dancing Girl Press, Heaven to Me from Headmistress Press, and Ammonite from Magnolia Press. She holds Louise holds a FFA in writing from UT Austin, an MFA in performance studies from Northwestern University, and a BA from Smith College. Abe Louise Young. Thank you.